Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome for the first time in quite some time to a live streaming edition of the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins Trubergy, also known as Byron Sidious. I am going to take a moment, since we've just gotten started, to play a little music before actually getting started and sharing out the link to a couple of places, or at least trying to assure that it's gone up where it needs to go. So let me take care of that in a moment. But we'll go ahead and put on some music first. Come on. I see a boost stopping like thunder. Your spikes point higher than the sky. You wear the cell like it's over, but you don't let go of your pride. Rebel son, fight with your color done. Rebel son, fight's not over when the day is won. A bit odd. I remember nights in the alley, straight and screaming out my rage. But every anthem turns to silence if you lock yourself in the cage. Raise your fist when no one is alone. All hearts and swords just behind the ring. Rebel son, for a cry from the common tide. Rebel son, the fight's not over when the day is won. The walls are wrecked, I get it, I know. But don't let the wreckage become your soul. Laugh when you can, cry when you must. The loudest rebellion is burning to the rebel son, we're praying that you'll come on the joy. Rebel son, fight not over when the day is won. One more tune and then we'll get to it. The roof leaks in, the floorboards creak. My wallet's thin, my future's bleak. But I laugh like I own the moon tonight. That'll do, Piggy, that'll do. But I got my feet. The world spins fast, but keep my beat. I smile wide like the stars are in my sight. You better it, that's my plan. Hold the line with my shaking hand. Then heard it like a stubborn man. Because I'm a stubborn man. All right, enough of that for now. Let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of it, because I am pretty much a who and a small timer and don't usually gather much of an audience. This is more just a quick and easy way for me to put together a video. There's rarely and many people in the audience when I do choose to live stream. I accept that. Let's go forward, however. Uh-oh. And if this view looks familiar from the last couple of videos I've done, I'm currently actually streaming from my Kindle. What I've been doing is setting up for videos I've done recently. I'm just taking this selfie stick and popped my phone into it in order to record videos. Popped it out here on this what used to be my son's dresser. Had to replace it with a bigger one so that they each had 4 drawers instead of just 3, and it's down here in my home office. So I've got my bookshelves behind me. So as a semi-proper, I guess, studio. Not really a studio. It's my home office. It's a small room down in the basement. Makes do for me. I make do with what I've got. Anyhow, the title of the stream is Challenge Accepted. In the realm of books and literature, the American Library Association, each and every year, has put forth to them these formal challenges from private individuals or in specific interest groups who have decided to lodge formal complaints or register their unhappiness towards certain books being made available for public purchase. Well, not public purchase, for public borrowing from library locations, either local public libraries available to all members of the public and or in public school libraries. The challenges tend to come along the lines of, well, we object to this title being available in this location because of reasons X, Y, and Z. Now, more often than not, classically speaking, the primary cause for most books to be challenged in this way is due to sexualized content, violent content, and divisive or sociopolitically heated language or subject matter. There's oftentimes challenges made towards titles that have a strong ideological bent, and these books are presented as challenges to the ALA, the American Library Association, and requests made for these books to be removed from, at the very least, public school libraries. Challenges that tend to gain the most traction or foothold are challenges made against the inclusion of titles in elementary school public libraries, for very good reason. There's some subject matter that is simply not, it's not appropriate for children under a certain age to have access to. The next most commonly challenged type of material is anything that depicts drug use and or paraphernalia, and especially if it includes passages or stories that hold a connotation of a positive or benevolent view of drug usage. You can find that a lot of books that discuss psychedelic drug use in the 60s and 70s were often challenged in the 80s and in the 90s, predicated on this heavy use of flowing imagery and benevolent or positive experiences being rendered from the use of psychotropic drugs, whether it be something as simple as marijuana or alcohol to something as hardcore as LSD, acid, and psilocybin mushrooms. There's a good reason why so many parents throughout the 1980s and 1990s issued challenges for the works of Hunter S. Thompson, particularly Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, to be removed from middle school libraries because there were copies of the book available for students to borrow and read in middle school libraries across the country, because not a whole lot of folks actually understood what was in the book, the sort of things that Thompson talked about. There were a couple of especially lurid scenes talking about dropping acid before going to press conferences. to limber himself up to address the public. Now, since roughly the mid-'80s, the American Library Association has been observed to increasingly take on a more pronounced and clearly identified socio-political or ideological bent, leaning towards a liberal progressive worldview and approach to any and all literature and materials to be included or promoted within their distribution networks and systems. For the most part, the leadership at the American Library Association, despite having clear biases and preferences, have by and large, even though they clearly state an ideological preference, leaning liberal or progressive, they have at least tried to pay lip service and in some cases taken stalwart, definitive, tangible action in favor of individuals or special interest groups and collectives that would lean more towards an oppositional or conservative framework or mindset or worldview. They have at least attempted to be roughly fair-handed in their approach. This has gone kind of out the window since about 2010. It's not completely thrown the baby out with the bathwater, because oftentimes the people who are paying attention to these things, to things such as literature, literary access, access to books and instructional and educational resources, the sort of folks who pay attention to these things, tend not to just be ideologically captured on one side or the other. There is actually a broad spectrum of people who pay attention to these things. They're not all liberal, progressive, or all conservative, right-leaning. It's not been all one or the other amongst the people who pay attention. The ideological balance, or rather imbalance, towards a hard-leaning progressive/liberal ideology have been the folks in the American Library Association's ranks themselves. However, as a body that is entirely funded and operated by the federal government and by various state governments, they are answerable to government restrictions and expectations, including fair and equal access, as well as keeping public records. Now, one of the few things that the American Library Association is not required to do, but they have been doing it since their inception, is keeping track of the various challenges that they receive from personal individuals or groups who wish to challenge titles availability in various distribution venues and outlets. They keep track of which titles have been challenged, the prevailing cause or narrative reason for the challenge, who issued the initial challenge and what date, and whether or not debate has been engaged in, and then if debate has been engaged in, what final determination has been made. Oftentimes, when a book is challenged by an individual, when there is an opening for debate, the ALA, the American Library Association, sends out a notification to the person who has issued the challenge saying, on this date, at this location, and it has to be, according to their own guidelines, at a public library location within a reasonable distance to the address of the person filing the challenge, they will have a session for discussion and debate. If the individual issuing the challenge does not attend that session for discussion and debate, the challenge is quashed. It's dismissed and thrown out the door. Approximately let me make sure I got the number right here. 89% of all dismissed challenges since the year 2000 have been dismissed because the individual challenger did not attend the session for discussion and debate. Once upon a time, this would be a matter of simply people they got into a huff, they got a bug up their butt, they had a bugaboo, they made the challenge and then forgot about it. Simple as. And you could easily explain it away as there's no maliciousness here. It's just a matter of someone got mad, or they got to use the colloquialism, they got their panties in a wad, challenged a title that they found took personal exception to. But once they were informed, okay, we've received your challenge, here's when we can discuss the matter. They either forgot about it because at least someone acknowledged that they'd been heard. There was a formal acknowledgement that, yeah, we received your challenge. We received your notification of intent to challenge this book's availability at locations X, Y, and Z for reasons X, Y, and Z. Someone was hearing them. And that at least put a lot of minds at ease. That it was noted that someone on the public record had said, I don't like what's going on here. That's all some folks want, is for it to be acknowledged that there is a problem that should be looked at. Around 2001, 2002, however, some folks began to notice when they would attend or attempt to attend these these discussion and debate meetings, when they issued a challenge against the title being made available at certain venues, operated and governed by the ALA, that when they arrived at the location they were informed to go to in order to have the discussion and debate session, no one from the ALA was there. People from the American Library Association, who could be as simple as the actual librarian who runs that location, they weren't showing up. Just like the folks who issued the challenges in the 80s and 90s, who then forgot about the challenge or missed the date for going and having the discussion, now that they were actually showing up to have the discussion and the debate, the folks at the ALA were not going to the meetings. And later on, when folks would come to check back with the American Library Association and say, hey, I arrived at the location, the library, in order to have the discussion and debate session, no one from the ALA was there, they would be informed, well, the session wasn't held, therefore the challenge has been dismissed. Well, that seems rather odd. It also seems rather underhanded. If somebody issues a challenge to a book, and you as the ALA don't send a representative to actually have the discussion and debate, that's on you. The person who challenged the title in the first place, they held up their end and came to the session. Your representative didn't, so you just dismiss the whole thing. They have to start all over again. That caused an obvious bit of a kerfuffle. And so the process became a little bit more regimented. People were granted several dates at which to try and get to one of these discussion and debate sittings or sessions. And rather than simply the ALA stating, here's the date and time that we'll have the discussion and debate, the process became more regimented, wherein they would reach out to the challenger individual or group and say, here's a set number of days and or times where we can have this discussion and debate session. Please select one. So there was a little bit more range of options of when to actually come forth and have that meeting of the minds. This improved the situation greatly. Hold on one second, sorry. Message from the daycare. Oof. Okay. Not a great day for the little one at daycare thus far, unfortunately. So, again, fast forwarding a little bit. Every year, as I said, the American Library Association keeps track of which titles have been challenged, for what reason, how much kerfuffle there is surrounding the title, who issued the challenge, what have you. And then the dates of when they had the discussion and debate. There's usually publicly available notes from that discussion and debate session made available to the public. They can just go down to their local library and ask for the minutes from any ALA challenge sessions, and then they can get a printout or a PDF copy of those minutes. Since then, the ALA has gone through a number of changes, including to its leadership. It used to be that there was simply an executive director, a couple of regional directors, and then central executive director, regional directors, and then locality directors and members of the American Library Association. However, since 1986, the ALA has swelled in membership as well as in roles to be held by various members of the ALA. The bureaucracy of the ALA has swelled. So there's just as many people in the American Library Association, but a whole bunch more of them got titles attached to them that do not necessarily always carry additional responsibilities, but with these extra titles comes extra salary, and these are public librarians, so guess who's footing the bill? You and me. Now, I love librarians, so I'm not going to bag on them for doing what they need to get a little extra scratch. And yes, they're government employees. Why would I be in favor of a government employee getting more money? Because they're librarians. I've got a soft spot for them in my heart. Someone who, as a kid, was constantly at the library making use of the materials therein. You know, as a twerpy 7, 8, 9-year-old kid, you can't buy your own books. You got to borrow them from the library or pray that your mother or father will buy them for you. And if you grow up not having a whole lot but a pot to piss in at best, the library becomes one of your favorite places. Trust me. Okay. In 2024, for the 2024-2025 session, the executive director of the American Library Association, and still currently serving until March, is one Daniel J. Montgomery, who goes by they, them pronouns. Bright and loud and proud. Make of that what you will. James Lindsay, as much of a clown as he has been sometimes in the last few, I'd say actually the last half year, has on a couple of occasions pointed out to people, hey, the American Library Association's got a problem. They're being or have been getting subverted for a rather long time. And boy howdy, he is dead on with that assessment. They are trying to, quote, queer the they're trying to queer the catalog. They're going out of their way as an organization to try and ensure that titles that are publicly made available for borrowing at the libraries align with a very hard left ideological bent towards progressive, liberal, socialist, borderline communist ideological bent. And you can see some of this cropping up in the challenges that are faced under the ALA. The Intellectual Freedom Fund is an organization that, by its title, you would assume tries to promote and protect and highlight the necessity for people to have their First Amendment rights to freedom of religion and the freedom to express themselves, to utilize intellectual property in a way that allows for their own creativity and agency, right? Yet, I would have to question why the Intellectual Freedom Fund has issued not one, not two, but 17 challenges in 2023 and 2024 to the book Fahrenheit 451. They have challenged its inclusion in public library venues. They have challenged it on the grounds of ideological or socio-politically divisive material. Okay. It's also been challenged on the grounds of promotion of criminal activity, including arson. There's just one problem with that challenge. Yes, there is quite a lot of burning things in the book, but the people doing the burning are the ones burning books. I want you to pause for a moment and consider how ironic it is that the Intellectual Freedom Fund wants to challenge and remove a book about burning books on the basis of it promotes arson? Have you read the book, folks? I seriously have to question whether you think everybody's an idiot. But here's the problem. They know who their audience is. They know that the current executive director, Daniel J. Montgomery, this they-them ideologue, and his forthcoming replacement, Maria McCauley of the Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts Library Association, they know that these people are on their ideological side. Let's discuss Miss McCauley for just a moment. She is a member in good standing with the Rainbow Roundtable, which is a subgroup of librarians in the United States that actively promotes the inclusion and promotion of LGBTQ plus IAA to whatever books and material and supplemental or auxiliary learning seminars and programs to be hosted by public library settings and to be funded by tax dollars. She is a member in good standing with the Sustainability Roundtable, which is a group of librarians that discusses and promotes materials and books and presentations, as well as auxiliary and supplementary educational materials and programs promoting sustainability, energy, and materials straight out of the Green New Deal. She's also a good member in standing with the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable, which is a subgroup splinter of members from the Intellectual Freedom Fund. There's a little bit of glad handing in here, and you would think that that would be a conflict of interest, but apparently no. Why? Because nobody but the most bookish nerds like myself are paying any damn attention to this. She's also a member in good standing of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Chinese American. But she's a member of the Black Caucus. Okay. But wait, she's also a member in good standing of the Chinese American Librarians Association. There are identity groups, identity affiliation groups inside the American Library Association. There is one for Pacific Islander. There's Pacific Islander American Libraries Association, the African American Librarians Association, the Chinese American Libraries Association, the Laotian American Librarians Association, the Russian American Librarians Association, the Ukrainian American Librarians Association, the Hmong Chinese American Librarians Association, the Latinx American Librarians Associations. There's nothing for Europeans in the American Library Association. Just pointing that out. Curiouser and curiouser. Miss Macaulay has a doctorate in philosophy from Cambridge University, and she has a bachelor's degree in theater from Ohio State University. Theater! She's a theater kid! And she is going to be the American Library Association's executive director for 2026 to 2027. She won the election this last year. She's going to be replacing Mr. Daniel J. Montgomery. Why is this of value or importance, you may wonder? Folks, I cannot stress enough how important books are. The very dresser that I've got this sitting on, I'm going to move this for a moment and show you something. I'm going to finagle with my own setup here, just so I can show you something. Okay. This dresser. Okay. Every drawer is full of books. These used to be all up on the bookshelves down in my family room of the house. But I decided, since I was moving this down here already, I wanted to empty out those shelves to make them available for my kids to put some of their books and their knickknacks and everything on as the years go by. Because this is their home as well as mine. You know, I've got a place to keep my books nice and safe and, you know, arranged and organized here in my office. So I made room for them and for their things. That's what a parent does. Give up of yourself for your children and their benefit, for their betterment. So I understand the vitality and the necessity, the importance of books, especially in a physical format, a tangible format that somebody can't go into and digitally alter after the fact. I've got this collection of Algernon Blackwood short stories. I can open this up to any of the short tales within, read it, consider it, maybe take some notes, put it away, put it back on my shelf, forget about it for a year. When I come down here, I pick this book up again because I'm having a hard time quite remembering something about a particular story that's still stuck with me. I can go back to that story in this book. I guarantee you it hasn't been changed by anybody. The same story is right here. I don't mind electronic books. I do read quite a few ebooks myself. But the ones that I get tend to be the ones that I either don't know the author, I'm just trying out their material for the first time, or it's something that I'm not especially attached to keeping a physical copy of. So I will indulge in leisure reading for pure entertainment purposes in electronic format. But if it's important to me, I'm going to get it in physical copy. Books are vital. And with the utter garbage slop that is served to us in terms of movies, film, and sometimes even video games these days, the vast majority of it is garbage. Our options for intellectually engaging entertainment are fewer and fewer. The ability to look to an entertainment option and not have it be a complete top to bottom ideological shit show has become harder and harder to achieve. But books, we still have books, and even genre fiction like what you get from Neil Gaiman. Sure, maybe Gaiman is a little bit more on the side of the creative, artistic, somewhat classically liberal bent, but that doesn't necessarily come across in his written material. You might not understand or grasp that about him personally from his actual fictional written works. Sometimes you can catch a hint here or there of how he views things because we do, as storytellers, project a certain amount of our own worldview into our writings. Certainly, I am guilty of doing it throughout my career as a storyteller. But it's not ham-fistedly hammering you over the head like so many movies and television shows and streaming shows and video games do these days. Even comic books are becoming insanely ideological and over the top. That's why I stopped picking up Zatanna. The first story arc of the current all DC All In storyline, I got about 2 issues in and started going, okay, the whole girl power, lady boss, wham and power thing was a little heavy-handed, even for a character who has classically been kind of a feminist icon in comic books. But it wasn't so heavy-handed previously. I got through the first story arc of this current run, and I stopped. I told my guy at the comic book shop, don't add this one to my pull list. I got through the first story arc, I'm done. Because it can only get worse from here. So I'm done with it. Not picking up anymore. Books, however, regular print books, are one of the few refuges that we have for entertainment if we don't want to be completely ideologically brainwashed. But the American Library Association, the very body of bookish folks who are supposed to be promoting literacy and reading comprehension and trying to help the public get access to reading material, they are themselves ideologically captured, part and parcel, wholesale, held in hand by a hell-bent, one-sided, progressive liberal lean in their leadership and their membership. This is not good. The fact that there have been 17 challenges to Fahrenheit 451 is only the start of it. And that's been just in the last year. Also included in the list of unusually high number of challenges for the last calendar year since this time last year has been George Orwell's 1984. Now, 1984 receives a high number of challenges every year. This isn't really exactly brand new territory for the title. Every year, 1984 is challenged at least 20 to 30 times by various private individuals or activist groups. And oftentimes it is challenged on the grounds of divisive ideological or sociopolitical context and topics. But each and every time, year after year, thankfully, the ALA comes down during the debate and discussion sessions and says, look, we have heard a lot of this before. It's all on the record. There's no brand new breakthrough reading of the text that is going to change our perspective or the public's perspective about this book. And no matter which edition of the book is used, the ALA has heard out every challenge to 1984's inclusion into public libraries and said, look, that's just not a convincing enough argument for us to give the green light to pull this book from distribution. It's not. It's not a good enough reason. There's an additional danger that folks might not be familiar with, however, when it comes to challenges with the ALA. If a story or a book of any sort lapses into the realm of public domain, the American Library Association, at its sole discretion since 1986, has been authorized to remove from distribution and sharing capacity any book that has lapsed into the realm of public domain. This is quite vital. And it's one of the dangers, one of the double-sided blades. It's one of those scalpels about public domain. I personally am fond of the concept of intellectual property becoming public domain after a certain amount of time has passed, especially once the creator of the intellectual property is no longer with us. After a certain amount of time after their passing, unless they specify in a final will and testament that intellectual property should be handed off to a recipient to carry on that work. Short of that, I personally would endorse and encourage the notion of material going into the public domain. The problem or challenge there on the flip side of that blade is that certain fiction works are so vital to our public discourse that if they become subject to the public domain removal from distribution, the American Library Association, especially with a work like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451, if they find that they are ideologically opposed to those works based on the ideological framework and worldview of the ALA's membership, once that title goes into public domain, they can, without restriction, remove it completely from public access. That doesn't mean the story is unavailable. And this is the other side of the argument. That, well, sure, the American Library Association has pulled that book, but you can still go buy it if you want. You can go to a local bookstore and purchase a copy of that book. Okay, fair argument. If you can find a fucking bookstore around you, and people will say, well, there's Amazon. Yeah, except Amazon doesn't always carry the book that you want either. Or they'll say, we can't locate a copy to send to you. It becomes really questionable for me when certain books are unavailable for public borrowing and or purchase from a private seller. It becomes really dicey for me and quite suspicious. I'm not a fan of that. It also is a keen reminder to me that I need to get a physical copy of both of those titles I just mentioned. I used to have a physical copy of each of those. I have no idea where they are. They could be somewhere in these boxes or bins of other books that I have, but I have to track down my copies. So when I label or title this stream "Challenge Accepted," the challenge that I think needs to be put forth to the American Library Association is to not be quite so quiet about what's being challenged, when, and why. Hold on one second. Okay. Oh boy, that's not great. Sorry, folks. Oh boy. Cripes. Okay. Things are not going great for the little one at daycare. She's being a bit crabby. Kind of expected this though. This is only her second week there, even with her big brother to help out and kind of guide her. These things are, they take some adjusting to. But the challenge I would put forth to the American Library Association is to ask, why is there such an obvious bent or bias in your membership? Why is there such an obvious and glaring tendency to want to push and promote titles and programs, including up to and including securing funding for auxiliary resources and programs that are only ever aligned sociopolitically with one specific side of the aisle? Because I have got to say, I don't remember seeing any public libraries hosting sessions of uh, pastor story hour or youth church leadership story hour. Why is it always drag queen story hour? And why do those things always get public tax dollar funding? Is there not a question to be asked about that? Greetings, Sarge. How do you do, sir? You know what I would love to see? I'd love to see Bikers for Books have a biker boy story hour where a couple of just sweaty, greasy, grease monkey mechanics and biker dudes come to a public library and sit down with the kiddies and read selections from Zen and the art of Zen and motorcycle maintenance. This is an actual book. Should look it up sometime. It's a great one. Or have brawlers for brawler book story time, where you can get some local amateur level MMA guys and gals to come read stories to the kiddos. How come it's only ever drag queen story hour? Seems a bit suspicious. Seems a bit fishy to me. Why not get some parents, some parent groups, or better yet, the American Library Association could reach out to the Homeschool Association of America, the HSA, and ask them, hey, do you have any homeschooling pod teachers or tutors who would like to come in once or twice a week to volunteer to do maybe their English or reading and writing lessons at the library and make it available for viewing to the public? And you could get some funding for that. But no, that doesn't seem to cross their minds. Well, I appreciate that, Sarge. Thank you. I'll still be around for about another 15, 20 minutes. Sadly, I rarely get a ton of time to do these shows. And if things keep up with little one at daycare the way they are, it sounds like we might have to pull her back out. Thank you, Sarge. Yeah, I decided it was time to finally grow it out. I haven't let it grow out in probably 7, 8 years. No, no, for sure 8 years. And even back then, I didn't have this. I just had the goatee and the mustache. But yeah, figured it was time to change up the look a little bit, feel and look my age a little bit more. I'm going to be 44 in April. It's time to look like it. I mean, I already kind of do. I got some grays creeping in. But yeah, the other thing that troubles me about QCing latest narration for Reforger. Oh, okay. Nice. Doing some quality control. Always good to make sure that what you've got there sounds right. Yeah. Oh boy. That might come in a little bit of trouble. But no, I genuinely want to know what it is about the American Library Association and its membership that causes them to try to kind of duck and dodge around certain challenges being issued to them. Now, many of the most recent ban lists or most challenged book lists over the last 4 or 5 years have all got one particular thing in common across almost all of them. In 2024, 2023, and 2022, the top 10 most challenged books for the American Library Association have been challenged on the grounds of excessive LGBTQ plus whatever, LMNOP, and sexualized content, including passages and visual depictions of pedophilic activity. Let me ask you, why these book challenges quite often were declined by the American Library Association? Some of these challenges went through, and the books got banned or removed from public schools, but they did not get banned or removed from local municipal public libraries. Why did the ALA go out of their way in so many of these cases to remove the challenged books when there was an overwhelming majority public outcry against them being available in the public schools, yet the ALA would issue forth decisions stating quite clearly for all the folks in the area to be aware, hey, yes, we're pulling these books from your public high school and middle school and elementary school, but they're still available for little Timmy or Jill to go down the road to the local library to borrow. Why do they make that secondary clarification only in the case of these particular books that get challenged and banned and removed from public school shelves? When To Kill a Mockingbird was, for the first time in a long time, successfully challenged and removed from public school shelves in I think it was a Charlotte or Charlottesville, from a Carolina public school, high school. They removed the book from the high school and the middle school. It had not been made available to elementary school in the district. But there was no statement put forth from the ALA stating, hey, the book's still available down at your local library. It still was. Kids could still go, high school kids could still go down to the local library, the local public library, and borrow the book off the shelf there. They only removed it from the middle school and high school shelves. But the ALA did not put out any statement indicating that it could still be borrowed from that location. But they put out public statements clarifying that these LMNOP books can still be found at a local public library. Quite suspicious. And yes, Sarge, that's precisely what I'm thinking. Is to ask how many of these fucking libraries took a trip to Epstein Island. It's always one-sided with the ALA. Now, granted, they have heard some challenges from people who I largely am on their side, but the arguments put forth I thought were just dead on wrong and retarded. During the publication cycle and the height of popularity of J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter books, there were a number of religiously affiliated parent groups who challenged those books' availability in middle school and high schools for including material that endorsed the practice of witchcraft. I personally found this to be absolutely laughable. And it's one of the few instances where you could not budge me an inch from standing side by side with the ALA when they said, this is a silly, unserious challenge. We're going to go ahead and hear your rationale, but then we are going to come back with the explanation that, hey, one, it's an obvious middle grade work of fantasy fiction. That's A. B, the framework of the world building of the books themselves establishes that magic has a cost and is dangerous, that it should only be practiced with education, with caution, and with proper training and limitations and regulation. So sure, you can try to make the argument, if you're a knucklehead, to say, oh, these books promoted witchcraft. They promoted, one, the fiction. Fiction! Two, they also promote the responsible use of magic, the ethical use of magic. If you have a gun, if you know somebody has a gun, wouldn't you rather they be educated on how to properly use it, when to use it, what circumstances and situations they should use it in, how to properly handle their weapon? What's the difference between that little piece of wood, that wand, and a 30-06? It's a weapon. I would prefer that you promote the proper instruction, maintenance, and care and ethical use of that weapon than just say, willy-nilly, go ahead, have at it, kid. Even if you accept the world-building framework, it teaches responsibility with power. Sarge, God damn it, I gotta highlight that. That's a wonderful one. Harry Potter may have been early grooming. It taught youths to like wands. Well, I mean, come on, Siegfried and Roy used wands in their stage act. I'd say, given their predilections and what they were doing to each other backstage behind the curtain, they were a little bit more into that magical groomery shit than anybody before J.K. Rowling. Anyhow, So sad that the tiger mauled them. I wonder if it got AIDS. Anyway, so you and I, Sarge, are both old enough to understand and appreciate that reference. Fucking Siegfried and Roy. God damn. But almost every time that the Harry Potter books have been challenged on the grounds of promotion of witchcraft and heresy, that challenge has been knocked down. And on that decision, I would stand with the American Library Association because their counter argument has always been soundly pointing out that yes, those books involve magic and the use of spell work and witchcraft, but they also teach about the responsible use of such power, the regulation of such power, and that is merely a narrative framework for a much more important underlying literary or allegorical cause. That the story is not so much about curses and blessings and the use of magical abilities and fantastical monsters and mayhem, that underneath all that, that's just stage dressing for a far more important kind of story, which is a hero's tale, which is much in line with Joseph Campbell's concept of the hero's journey, or kind of a hero's journey slash kind of tropey, stereotypical chosen one narrative. Kind of a blend of those things. And I'm not trying to knock Rowling when I say that, but let's face facts. I'm familiar with storytelling technique and frameworks and architecture well enough to know the Harry Potter books are little more than a hero's journey slash chosen one blend with a lot of magical stuff kind of used as set dressing, effectively. You could also say it's a coming of age story, again, wrapped in all that shit. But I'm not keen on the chosen one thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. She went a little heavy handed on it. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. That's all I'll say. Because I don't want the Potterheads to lambast me because I've poked their sacred cow. Look, you can enjoy it. That's fine. But it has its problems. Shit, every story has its problems. Do you think anything I've written has ever been anything approaching perfect? No. I do the best I can. So did Miss Rowling. She's had tremendous success, and I applaud her for it. At least I don't hate her books. Sarge, once again with a zinger. Sarge says, I never understood the urge to burn witches at the stake until 2020 or so. Blue-haired nose ringers have made me more accepting of the old Salem. Yeah. Burn the witch! Drown the witch! If she floats, she's a witch. If she drowns, then God rest her soul. You know, Kafka traps before there was Kafka. I have to wonder how much of that Franz Kafka looked at as kind of a model for his story, The Trial. Okay. And by the way, that's something else that really boggles my mind. I was having a conversation with an almost borderline heated conversation with a coworker on break the other day. And he had been trying to argue the position or his perception that because I didn't blanket support certain things, that was proof that I was a type of ist. And I said, no, I can assure you I'm not. And he said, and I quote, your denial of that is just further proof that you are. To which I replied, lovely little Kafka trap you've got there. And he gave me a double take and said, what? This guy is my age and he's never heard of a Kafka trap? When did people stop reading? From my own generation. Look, it's hard to say this. Technically, I'm a millennial because I was born in 82. My two older brothers, they got lucky in that they were born within the framework of Gen X, right near the tail end. I just missed the cutoff by a couple of years. I was born in 82. So technically, I'm a millennial or a xennial, that weird kind of in-between middle ground of people born between 77 and 82. That's kind of its own little weird subgroup between some Gen Xers and some millennials, where we have a lot of leaning toward Gen X, especially if you had older siblings who were born solidly in the Gen X framework. It's actually the whole reason why sociologists started using that term, xennial, was because the parents of Gen X kids tended to have 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 kids. But the first couple would be born within the framework of solidly being in the Gen X years, near the tail end of Gen X, which is those born between 1965 and 1980. But then they might have 1 or 2 kids born in the first couple of years of the 1980s. They missed the cutoff. They're technically millennials, like myself, but because they had older siblings who were born solidly in that Gen X time frame and cutoff, they grew up, like myself, heavily influenced by the worldview and attitudes of their older siblings who were solidly Gen X. So sociologists cribbed together this weird middle ground subgroup referred to as xennials. Folks who are in kind of the middle ground between Gen X and millennial. They tend to socially lean a little bit more towards the Gen X older framework, but they have some other social leanings that tend toward more millennial frameworks. Yeah, and that's the problem, Sarge. Like, dude, especially the original Red Dawn, when it was the fucking Ruskies. Like, okay. My understanding of the biggest differentiation between solid Gen X and solid millennials is that solid solid cohort Gen Xers would collectively say, oh, the commies are coming. Well, we saw what happened the last time there was a great big commie power in the world. Them and the United States had nuclear warheads aimed at each other's heads and held the entire world hostage under the potential threat of a mushroom cloud through the entire Cold War. Do we want to live in the shadow of that terror for the rest of our lives? No. We need to push that down and shut it the fuck up, because it is clearly not a good idea to let that rise up again. But many of your solid millennials are going, hooray for the Reds! What is your damage? Who gave you the idea that that was a good thing? Well, we just believe that everybody should get a fair share. Certainly it's a fair share where we're all starving to death like the folks who died in the Holodomor, you fucking moron. Did you never read about Mao's glorious revolution, which starved out millions of his own fucking people because they couldn't farm because the farmers all had to surrender their equipment to make pig iron? Have you people lost any idea of the horrors that came before? And I stop myself. And I think, wait, they really don't have any idea. Because all of that information has been sanitized. Sanitized by the kind of subversive, ideologically captured, march through the institutions people who are in the positions of educating them. So unless they actually go to a library to read the history for themselves, they're not going to have any blinkering idea. Or if they don't go and read the great classics of genre literature or even just straight up literature, they'll have no concept of what real, no bullshit, no holds barred evil really is. When you read Lord of the Rings, understand that the Easterlings, who threw in their lot with the forces of Sauron, they are subversives. They are the fucking commies. And you could learn that if you actually read and understood genre fiction. Now, to be clear, Tolkien himself clarified near the end of his life that he did not intend for his works to be analyzed in that way. That's the hierarchy of analysis. Clarification from the creator comes ahead of inference from the creator and their colleagues, comes ahead of interpretation. And the author himself gave us some tools to work with. Okay, I can accept that. But I also accept that there's a reason why so many people see that in the work. It's called parapraxis, also more colloquially known as a Freudian slip, where you say something that you didn't intend to say. It happens to storytellers too. You can't tell me it doesn't. Look at the bullshit with Batman and the New 52. It touches into everything. This is why I go off on a fucking spurg out. And why I struggle to understand how people can't see these things. And then I stop again and remember, I'm a freak on a leash. Of course, other people aren't actually thinking about these things. I'm the fucking weirdo out of the norm here. Fuck. Oh, yeah. No, I forgot that they had changed that in the remake, Sarge, that they had switched it to North Korea. See, I never watched the remake. So I didn't even know. But anyway. Like, it's really kind of... You'll appreciate the humor in this, Sarge, and anyone else listening or watching. Mega Man. By the way, small thing I gotta point out here. How awesome is the artwork on that? Fucking, I still gotta read this one. It's the Legends Timeline issue 1. Well, there's only going to be one issue. It's a limited promotional series. Mega Man X got his own ongoing series, though. So, his timelines managed to spawn enough interest, generated enough interest that there will now actually be an ongoing Mega Man X comic series from Udon Publishing. which is pretty cool. Gotta love the Blue Bomber. Mega Mayhem. Anyway, but that's what I was trying to get back to. You'll appreciate the humor in this, Sarge, I imagine. I don't have, and I've said this for a long time, I don't have post-secondary credits to my name. I have said this numerous times. Like 3 or 4 months ago, my older brother Colin pointed out to me, yeah, but Josh, you went through vocational training and got a certification from the state of New York in criminal justice science and applied science. I said, yeah, and? So what? He said, so you do technically have post-secondary education. It was just vocational education instead of a college education. I kind of smacked my forehead because, okay, he's technically correct. But I didn't go to a college campus. I've never set foot in a college classroom. That's my point there. When I say I don't have any post-secondary education, okay, technically I'm wrong. But when I say I've never sat in a college classroom, I still have some technical correctness there. Just give me a little bit of room to work with here, folks. But how ironic is it that dipshit me with so many teeth missing in his face, looking like a fucking redneck hayseed from the back hills of Arkansas, who most people would presume is a complete numpty, who is also just a middle-of-the-road, middle-class guy with way too many kids. Love my kids. But I've got 4 kids at home and a full-time job. What do I do for a job? I'm just a janitor. Okay? Nothing special. How is it that I can see these patterns and these connections and make these observations and think long and hard about the possible ramifications of what all of this means when it cascades together? How is it that I can see the bullshit that they're pulling and call it out for what it is? Yet because I don't have a piece of paper from a university, anything that comes out of my mouth regarding these things, about literature, about distribution, about access to information, about literary analysis, and trying to parse through the psychoanalytical meanings and viability of certain constructed theorems about these stories and the architectural frameworks thereof, and the comparative mythologies that they stem from. How is it I can do this, but I will be dismissed out of hand because I don't have a certain credential? How is that where we're at? How? Where someone can take their own time, go out of their way, devote a high volume of their personal time and attention to these things, but that person will be dismissed because they didn't pay or go into unanswerable debt to get a piece of paper saying, yeah, we acknowledge that this guy or this gal went through our required dogmatic indoctrination in order to get a piece of paper saying that he's entitled to say these things. That's a fair point, Sarge. But I didn't go to the college. I didn't throw myself into incalculable debt that I'd never get out of. Not because I was any kind of genius as a kid, but because I thought the whole notion was a scam and that I'd be better served trying to go out and learn this shit on my own, where I wouldn't have some instructor or some professor constantly breathing down my neck about required readings and required courses and X number of papers that had to be turned in by Y date, because I knew I was enough of an idiot to need more time than that. I am not the quickest thinker on my feet. Okay? There's a reason I don't get involved in things like actual debate. Do you know why? Especially not the kind of blood sports debate that you see on YouTube or Twitch or Rumble or or Kick. Pick your platform of choice. There's a reason I don't get into debates like that. The biggest reason is I'm not that smart. I have to take my time with these things. And I am willing to take my time with these things because my thought process is a little messy for reasons that I don't always like getting into. My thought process is a little scattershot. It looks like if you were to take a baked ziti, stick an M80 in it, light it, and run away. The aftermath of that science experiment, or rather, as it's in motion, that kind of illustrates what my thought process is like. If you were to give my thought process a face, it would look like a guy who got a straight shave with a broken beer bottle. Okay? I understand that's a hell of a way to put it, but I think it's the only thing that's appropriate, that fits. See, like occasionally I'll come up with a good one like that. Sometimes I can pull off something like that off the top of my head. Typically, though, I have to be writing these things down, or I'll never remember them. That one, that was a decent one. I'm going to try to hang on to that one for later. I gotta write that down. Hold on a second. I'm gonna write that down. Sorry. If I don't write shit down, I'll never remember it. Because I'm an old man. Let me put on some tunes in the back. And yeah, college debt is like fucking insane. Sarge has the best point there. Every color, every slogan, every cause, every call. By the way, Sarge, how have you been liking some of the tunes, some of the music videos I've been putting out on Rumble? It has been for me a lovely way to kind of work up my own capacity for poetry, because I tend to not write a lot of poetry, but when I do, I tend to have a very specific purpose behind it, a very specific message. And I've been utilizing Suno to take some of my poetry and run it through that with instrumentation to create songs. Oftentimes in the punk and ska genres of music, because those are two of my favorite genres of music. I especially use a lot of ska for the video game stuff. But anyhow, I'm going to be wrapping it up here in a minute because I got to head upstairs and start getting ready for work for the day. I also have to issue a little bit of an apology to my buddy Ryan, or rather Digney. This was not a planned show. I got a wild hair up my ass. I had the free time today at home because I'm the only one home right now. You know, the two youngest ones, they're at Miss Jessica's daycare. My two older ones are both at school. My wife is at work. It's just me rambling around. And I should be spending this time writing or reading a book or playing a video game. I should be relaxing. But guess what? This is what I did yesterday. I most of the time I was by myself at home yesterday. I did a little writing for about a half an hour, and then I went up onto my couch in the living room and I sat there and I read for almost 2 hours. It was actually really nice. But I can't say that I read the whole 2 hours because, motherfucker, I fell asleep because I'd had shit for sleep the night before. I probably actually only read for about an hour before I nipped off. I passed out. And, when my oldest got home from school, she was just like, Dad, sat up like I'd been stung in the foot by a bee. But anyhow, yeah, that's about it. So wrapping back to the title of the stream and kind of the point I am trying to make overall. The American Library Association itself, at this point, deserves to be challenged. The ALA and the Public Library Network, the entire public library system, is funded with tax dollars. I find it unconscionable that a publicly funded operation that is governed and regulated from a state level and then above that at a federal level is taking tax dollars on both a federal and a state, and in some cases a county level, and is spending all of its funding. Oh, dear Sarge, glad I caught you today with a $10 Rumble rant. I appreciate that greatly, brother. Always appreciated. But the challenge that I have for the American Library Association is as follows. Why are you taking taxpayer money, taxpayer funds from everybody across the entire socio-political spectrum, and you're only using those funds when it comes to auxiliary programs and educational resources and events, only allocating funds for one side of the socio-political spectrum. Only allocating funds and resources and making determinations on these title challenges in favor of liberals and progressives. Yes, there have been successful challenges, as I highlighted, to certain titles being distributed to school shelves. But then you issue public statements and clarifications saying, hey, fringe lefty parents, if you want your kids to have access to the absolute perversion and filth that was conscionably and reasonably challenged and booted out of the public school library, you can still send your kid down to the local library, the municipal library, to borrow that filth and look at that filth and fill their heads with that degenerate nonsense. But when To Kill a Mockingbird is removed from school shelves, you say nothing. Even when the book is available at a municipal public library, you don't tell the parents, hey, that book your kid was interested in, that was successfully challenged and we couldn't argue shouldn't be read because of X, Y, and Z reason, they can still go find it at the local library. Okay? It's down there. Go ahead. Tell your kid they can find it down there. Why the uneven notification? We all know why. At this point, it's blatantly obvious. Your current serving executive director of the ALA is a pronoun-wielding they, them, and is going to be replaced by this woman who has served on various fringe, ideologically left, definitively left, progressive organizations. She doesn't do the pronoun thing, but you look at all the different organizations that she's a part of, and it's pretty easy to tell. What's really distressing to me about that element, I found all this shit with a 5-minute Google search. I didn't rely on AI. I didn't use Gemini. I didn't use Grok. I didn't use Claude. I didn't use ChatGPT. I went to straight up Google and just typed in, who is the current sitting director of the American Library Association? And the first 5 or 6 results led me to this information. This is easy to find. I am a retard, and I found it. Honestly, Sarge, I don't know why. I have no idea. Here's the thing. And this is one of the few times that I actually will rely a little bit on some of that little bit of technical post-secondary education that I did have. Because one of the things that was a primary course when I went through and took criminal justice, took that criminal justice course, was investigative methodology. Part of investigative methodology, the concept of it, is that your best method, your best means of figuring out what information is useful to your specific investigation is ask the question, have your interpositional query. Here's my question. And when you ask certain sources, look at how relevant to the actual question you've asked the response is. The less relevant the response is to your question, the less directly connected it is to your actual question, the less likely it is to be reliable as a response. So you can safely set it aside. The shorter and more closely related to your actual question a response is, the more reliably you can point to it and say, this is where I need to go next. This is my next step. From this, I go to my next step. And that is something I will admit I've held on to for a long time. If I pose the question to you, Sarge, hey, I'm gonna go sports ball because I love sports, especially football. If I ask you, hey, that really controversial interception in overtime in the Bills Broncos divisional playoff game this last week, what did you think about that? If your response is to say, well, we have to take a look at how the game started and what the receiver packages were and the defensive measures that were put on the field by Sean Payton and the Broncos, I'm going to say, stop, in my head. I'm not actually going to ask you to stop. I want you to continue answering. Because in my head, I'm thinking, what you're giving me right now is all filler. Because it's not directly addressing the question I asked. I asked about the overtime interception. I didn't ask about the beginning of the game. I didn't ask about the defensive packages that were lined up. I didn't ask about the run of the play clock. I didn't ask about the division of passes versus rush plays. I didn't ask about any of that. I asked about the interception. And Sarge, you've got it dead on there. It's not an answer, it's a deflection. It sounds a lot like an answer. No, actually, they didn't do the whole two anthems thing during that game, Sarge. When it comes to, much of the NFL is compromised. I'll grant you that. But the Broncos and Bills, as organizations, are relatively middle of the road, slightly leaning almost based for Buffalo. Almost. Not quite. As for the Broncos, well, they're in Colorado. But they're not overt about it. Anyway, I'm going to get going. I'm going to charge my phone, put together my lunch, get changed and ready for work. Sarge, you have my great appreciation for the $10 Rumble rant you sent to me. It's never necessary, but always deeply appreciated. To all you folks who are watching the replay later on, when I ask these questions, when I put forth to you that there is an issue with the American Library Association and the way that they handle challenges, understand that the American Library Association itself deserves to be challenged. They have a definitive and obvious ideological bent and bias, and it is clear as daylight for anyone who bothers to take 2 seconds to look into it. Anybody. If a schmuck like me can figure it out, so can you. That's true, Sarge. Fair enough. Remember that there is a great deal at risk. Every movie you watch, every show that you watch, every streaming program that you enjoy has source material. It's written first. If they get a hold of all of this and make demands on what can and cannot be said between the covers of these pages, if someone like Fred Saberhagen can be silenced, changed, forgotten, dismissed to the annals of time with no trace of his genius, then there will be no hope for anything to be decent, entertaining, and meaningful down the road. It starts with the books. Protect the foundational material, and then maybe there will be hope for what grows or gets adapted from that material. Okay. I've been on my soapbox long enough, ladies and gentlemen. It's been almost 2 hours. I don't usually do that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I ask that you take care of yourselves, and as always, keep reading.